Hello, everybody. Welcome to this training session. Thank you so much for joining Mark and I. My name is Samantha, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Blue Link. So I think there might be a couple people still slowly joining, but we'll let them in as they get here. What we're going to do is we have all of you guys on mute, but if you do have any questions, feel free to just ask them in the chat, and I will kind of be manning that. And then at the end, after about 30 minutes or so, we will be able to go through some of those questions. If anybody, can't hear me or is having issues with the audio, please just also let us know in the chat. Hopefully everybody is doing well through some of this crazy coronavirus stuff. I know things have been pretty hectic and weird lately, so hopefully this training session will give you guys something to focus on and allow you to maybe get some better use out of some of the Blue Link tools that we have to offer. And it sounds like things are maybe going to start looking like the new normal soon, so we'll have to just kind of keep in touch as we see what's happening down the road. But I guess without further ado, thanks again for joining us. There is a reminder that there will be another training session tomorrow as well as one next week. If you have any questions or trouble accessing those, just reply to the emails that we sent out initially, and we'll make sure that you guys are all included and the appropriate people from your team is included as well. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Mark Keynes, who most of you know as the president of Blue Link, and he will be the one leading us through this session.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So hi, everyone. Sam, I want to verify a couple of things. Number one, can you hear me clearly?
I can, yes.
Okay, and number two, if I change the slide that I'm displaying to the agenda, do you see that?
I do, yes.
Okay, now I've changed back. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So as Sam said, we're keeping everyone's microphones muted so we can stay on point and get you back to whatever else you need to be doing as quickly as possible. Try and get through what I want to convey to you guys within the next half hour, but then we will have some time at the end for questions and answers, which you can type into the chat window. Samantha will be monitoring the chat window, and at the appropriate time or towards the end, she'll start throwing some of the questions at me. And hopefully I can answer some of them. So without further ado, I'm going to run through a few slides first, and then we're going to get our hands I'm going to get my hands kind of dirty on some financial reporting. So first of all, to make sure that everybody understands what we are looking at today, we are looking at Blue Link's relatively new financial report writer, which is an add-in to Microsoft Excel. It is for creating financial statements. So let's actually jump to the next slide. I've labeled this slide agenda. We're not really going to follow this agenda strictly. It's more like a cheat sheet for what I need to make sure I've covered with all of you by the end of this session. But starting off with number one, what is this? This is a Microsoft Excel add-in, and it reports on general ledger data only. So it is designed to create financial statements, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, statements of cash flow, etc. And the third point there, number three, is however. However, this is Excel. Somebody with the appropriate Excel skills is able to build financial statements and reports that relate to non-general ledger data, such as sales history, purchase history, inventory records, in the same Excel workbook and link them together. And we're going to see an example of how you can do that. Now, the majority of you on this call do not actually have the financial report writer. So very briefly, this is a tool that is provided basically free of charge to our hosted customers and at a relatively small nominal monthly fee to our on-premise customers, because there is a cost of installing something on your own server that doesn't exist when you're in a hosted environment. So it is available and can be requested by just communicating with Joanne Fazari, our customer service manager, or even just sending in an email. We can arrange to get this kind of installed and set up for your use. So the purpose of today's session is to introduce you to some basic usage, as well as give you a sense of what this tool is, and therefore whether or not you might want to use it. Now, at this stage, it does not replace the built-in financial report generator that is rather arcane, in that will still exist, but there will be no further development or enhancements on that. It is kind of old technology. It kind of works, but it's limited in what you can do. So you're going to see how the new generation of Blue Link Financial Report Writer can actually work for you. A little bit of history. A year ago this time, it was still being developed. It went into initial beta testing at 3 customer sites plus at Blue Link's own use in the summer of last year, and was made generally available in the late fall. And we initially rolled it out very slowly and very carefully and cautiously. There are some known issues, but they all relate to performance and speed as opposed to actual functionality. And we do already have a laundry list of requested new features, which are on the sheet for discussion when we do our next iteration of the product, which will be during this coming summer. So without further ado, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and jump to a slide where I also want to make you aware of, if you do start working with the Financial Report Writer add-in, there are some resources. There is a user guide that you will get as part of your installation. It's a 20-something page user guide. It is fairly comprehensive. It is written in plain English. It has screenshots. It's very easy to read and follow. And there are also some training videos. And on this side of the screen over here is basically a YouTube video, training video. It also gives you an idea of what a financial statement might look like. This is an example of a financial statement that gives 3 rolling months plus year-to-date and last year-to-date, the charts and all that kind of stuff. So this is an example of a finished financial statement. The training resources so far have proven to be more than adequate for almost all the other users that have started using the software. So while we have provided some one-on-one training, it's kind of been superfluous. The user guide and the videos between them seem to have been sufficient for people to get started. So really what I'm going to cover today is going to be a subset of what the user guide and what the videos cover. But again, hopefully it'll just give you a reasonably good starting point. So let's jump ahead to Excel. Okay, so Sam, I just want to confirm you can see training company sample on your screen now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So we're in an Excel workbook, and we are looking at a financial statement. Now, this is pointing to the demo data that we typically use for sales demos. So there's not a lot of transactions in it, but there are enough, and there are several years worth of transactions. So what we're looking at here is a very simple profit and loss statement for the year 2018, showing month-by-month numbers, and then it's showing your year-to-date or your full year's amount. It's showing the previous year and 2 years ago. This is just an arbitrary statement that I created for this training session. Just wanted you guys to know that I timed myself with my stopwatch on my phone, and it took me just under 11 minutes to create this statement from beginning to end. And to be honest, about half that time was trying to figure out the appropriate color schemes and shading and fonts for these headings and stuff, because my visual design skills are absolutely abysmal, as you can probably tell. But what I did do here is I wanted to create a statement that we can look at, and then we can sort of unpack it a little bit to see how I managed to create this. And then we're going to ultimately, at the end of the session, towards the end of the session, in about 20 minutes from now, we're going to actually create a statement from scratch, from like a blank screen. But the starting point is that this is a financial statement that, for example, summarizes a bunch of accounts into one label called sales, summarizes another bunch of accounts into cost of sales, then uses simple Excel math to calculate gross margins, etc., etc. I then decided to further break down my expenses. So this expense amount over here, this line here, is further broken down by just aggregating them by department. My demo data has 2 departments. Every account, every expense account belongs to one or other of the departments. So I broke it down this way. And then finally, I also broke it down by groups of accounts. And again, you'll see how I grouped these accounts into 3 different groupings. And again, obviously, the numbers should all match. Now, one of the advantages, well, 2 of the advantages of using Excel as a financial reporting tool, and many of the generally available financial reporting tools for many other ERP systems are also Excel add-ins, and it's for the same reasons. Number one, if you have Excel skills, which most of us accounting people do, you're able to use those Excel skills. You can use your conditional formatting, you can put in a formula, you can do whatever you can do in Excel, and make the statement look how you want, and do calculations on ratios and all that kind of stuff. But the second thing is that because it's Excel as opposed to a more traditional reporting format, it's interactive. So I'm going to go and change the year from 2018 to, I don't know, let's say 2016, and watch how the numbers update as soon as I hit enter. So in real time, I'm now looking at different periods. Same thing if I go and change this to 2017 or 2019. We get this, you get the idea. So one of the one of the most advantageous uses of this is you're not only using this to actually print a report. Yes, you can still print a report. You can generate a PDF, you can print it on paper, you can create all kinds of balance sheets and income statements and so on that you can distribute and publish. But the idea is that you can also work with it interactively. So the next thing that's really important to understand is that when I say interactive, I really do mean interactive. Let's just say that I'm a little bit suspicious about this sales number of 64,892. Seems a bit of an outlier. I can drill into the detail and see which GL accounts make up that balance, and it's just busy loading the transaction detail behind those accounts. So right off the bat, I can see that these are the 3 accounts that actually make up that amount, and it's just busy loading the actual detailed transactions behind these accounts. And once it's finished loading, and it just takes a little while. This is one of the performance things I mentioned earlier. It takes a little while first time you do it, and the rest of the session you're fine. But I can now look at this account, which has 64,854, click on it and see the transactions that make it up. So I can see what's going on. It looks like there was one very, very big sales order. Looks like it's invoice number 50970 that was for $65,000. So a fairly useful thing. So let's look a little bit of the magic that's behind it. How did we actually get to this? So first of all, what is actually in the cell? How did the $64,892 get there? Well, if you look up here in the title bar, I'll just highlight it. Well, that didn't probably show up all that well. But there is a formula. It's called a BLFS formula. This is a custom formula that we have added to Excel. It's part of the Excel add-in that pulls information from your general ledger numbers, actually from the general ledger transactions, aggregating them by fiscal month and by fiscal year. And by the way, the system does, this report writer does respect non-calendar fiscal years as well. My demo data is set up as a calendar year. But the BLFS formula recognizes different fiscal years. And what it's doing is it's referring to different parts of the spreadsheet to figure out which GL transactions it should aggregate and present in this cell. Now, here's the good news. You do not ever have to understand this formula. You can if you want, but you never have to, because we have a tool that allows us to automatically create the formula pointing to the right things. What this formula points to is a number of cells that are currently hidden. Those cells are hidden because I used a little feature of Excel called grouping. This is just an Excel feature, so some of you more power users in Excel will know about grouping. If you don't, doesn't really matter. I just kind of like using it to hide the columns and the rows that we don't really need to look at when looking at a financial statement to make it look kind of prettier or more professional, maybe is the better word. And I can collapse them and expand them by just with a single click. So I typically tend to hide the leftmost 5 columns, or the leftmost 4 columns actually, and the top 6 or 7 rows. Actually, I guess it's 5, so that we don't need to actually look at them. But essentially what our BLFS formula is pointing to is it's pointing to some of these things at the top of the column to figure out which fiscal year it should be pulling, whether it's pulling a month or year-to-date number. So you can see month here, year-to-date over there, and which period we're interested in. So period 10, period 9, period 8, period 7, etc. And then it's looking on the left-hand side in this particular scenario for the account number or the group of account numbers, the department or group of departments. And then also for those of you who do use job costing, we can also drill that. We can also go down to analyzing our financial statements by the job code and cost code. For anybody who signed up to tomorrow's training session with Darren on how to use job codes and cost codes to actually further slice and dice your transactions, that session will tie back to this. So I'm not going to talk too much about these other than to understand that you effectively have up to 4 different segments, if you like, of your GL, which you can use to slice and dice for financial reporting using this tool. Now, you've probably already realized that you use an asterisk as a wild card. So an asterisk means everything. So 4 plus an asterisk means any account that begins with 4. And then we're including all departments, all job codes, and all cost codes. Similarly, over here with expenses, 6 with an asterisk refers to all accounts that begin with a 6, which I happen to know are my expense accounts. And then you will notice, if I just expand column A a little bit, you'll also hopefully notice that down here, I've got these groupings of different expenses by category by just creating ranges of accounts. So account that to that, account that to that, and account that to that. I can also put in discrete individual accounts by separating them with commas. And there's actually a way, believe it or not, of saying, I want to include all accounts between 60000 and 60100, but then I can say except this account and that account. So there are exceptions. These are all very easy to follow and well documented in the user guide. But the concept here is that we're able to tell the financial report writer, grab my general ledger data, follow this left-hand side to decide which accounts to include on any given row, and follow the information at the top to figure out which periods, for which periods to include the data in a column. An important point for the more advanced financial report writers amongst you is that you have the ability to change where things are. So for example, let's take department, great example. If you wanted to have a departmental profit and loss that laid out let's say the revenue and expenses department by department in the columns, yes, you can move the department reference from being on the left-hand side to being at the top, and then have your departments across the columns. And again, this is explained in one of the training videos as well as in the user guide. Okay. So just before we get to looking at how to build a report from scratch, which is what we're going to get to in a couple of minutes, there's one very obvious elephant in the room that I kind of haven't, I used, but I didn't say anything about it. Part of the magic of the of any add-in in Excel is the ability in all versions of Excel since like I think 2007 or 2010 to be able to create additions to the ribbon. So the same Excel ribbon that you're accustomed to using for, whoops, not for home, but for things like, you know, insert, draw, home, all these different things, we were able to add in a Blue Link ribbon. And that Blue Link ribbon has the icons that you need to actually use the system. What happens is, you can, first of all, you can point the financial report writer at multiple different companies. Okay, you will need our technical team's assistance to actually set that up. It uses something called web services, and you have to get something called a web key or an API key. But when you set up company connections, you actually set up the pointer to the actual company data file, and you set the credentials of the user that is entitled to use this to somebody who has access to the general ledger. So somebody who should not have access through the Blue Link user interface to general ledger will not be able to use this. So if this is your own personal Excel, you would put what's called a cached username. So you would actually save your username with these credentials. But if this is Excel on a server that multiple people could use, you would not save a username, and then you'd have to log in using your Blue Link Elite login every single time that you fired up this report writer to make sure that you are a person that has access to the general ledger information. So it's just a security thing. The other three icons on here are fairly self-explanatory. Refresh data allows you to pull the latest data from your general ledger. So the way this actually works is behind the scenes, it is storing the relevant general ledger information in a hidden tab of the spreadsheet that you can never unhide. So it's completely locked down. There is no way. But it's actually loading that data into an invisible tab with the spreadsheet, which is one of the reasons that we're able to see things happen so quickly when we do things like changing the year, for example. Because it doesn't have to go out and reach out to the database. It's simply pulling it from a hidden tab on the spreadsheet. Therefore, when you want to get the most up-to-date data, you need to click on refresh data, pick the company you want to, click on that company, and this is an area where it's a little slower than I'd like it to be the first time you do this after booting up Excel. It can take up to 20, 25 seconds to load the data. I haven't seen it take longer than that, no matter how big the data is. If you then go and work around a little bit and then want to refresh it again because some of your colleagues may have processed transactions, it's then usually pretty quick. It's 4 or 5 seconds to refresh the data. The drill into selection we've already seen. We've already used that. That's that ability to click to highlight any cell that has a formula, click on the drill into selection button, and pop up your drill down to details screen. Where we're going to go next is we're going to use this insert report button. So what we're going to do in the next maybe 4 to 5 minutes is we're going to create a multi-column profit and loss statement, a summary one, just to see how quickly and easy it is to do, and just to verify that we don't really need to understand the BLFS formula. So this is how I always start a financial statement. I'm going to go to a brand new tab. Let's just move it to the end. I'm pedantic about that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom a little bit to make it a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. So what I do is I click on Insert Report. Screen pops up asking me, choose the company. I'll choose our demo data. Do I want to specify a specific group of general ledger accounts, or do I just want them to be all? I'll leave the asterisk in to get all of them. Same thing with department, job, and cost code. Which fiscal year? I'm going to use 2019 because there's very little data in 2020 in my demo data. Starting month for the statement, I'll leave it as 1. Balance type, very important. There are 3 balance types. M, month, means the movement, the net transactions for all appropriate accounts for the month should go into the column that we create. So I should explain what we're initially going to create is a single column, single row report that we will then use as a basis to create a multi-column, multi-row report. So in the column, do we want to show the net transactions per month? Do we want to show a year-to-date transaction amount? Or do we want to show a year-to-date balance, which would include year-to-date transactions plus any opening balance? So if you were creating a balance sheet, you would use this third one, B, because that adds your opening balance of your asset, liability, and equity accounts to the transaction value. Honestly, for income and expense accounts, it really doesn't make a difference whether you put B or Y, because your income and expense accounts will never have an opening balance, so you'll get the same number for both of them. But for balance sheets, obviously, it'll make a very, very big difference. And similarly, for balance sheet accounts, if you're creating a statement of cash flow, for the appropriate lines on your statement, or the appropriate columns, I should say, you would actually be using year-to-date because you don't want the opening balance for the change in receivables and things like that. Anyway, I'm going to leave the default of month, and I'm simply going to click Create. Every time you create a statement, ask if you want to get updated data. I'm just going to say no to save a few seconds, but it'll ask if you want to go and pull refresh data from the database and put it into that hidden tab of the spreadsheet. So all we have now is we have a single line statement. It has one cell that actually has a BLFS formula. It has all accounts, so therefore it should be 0 if our trial balance balances, which it does. And it's for the first month, in this case, January of 2019. Now, for those of you who are a little bit more familiar or comfortable with Excel, you will recognize that the parameters that the BLFS formula is pointing to, the cells that it's pointing to, most of them have a combination of relative and absolute cell addresses. So if you don't know what relative and absolute cell addresses are, you may want to brush up on that before you use this tool. But essentially what this allows us to do is it allows us to copy a formula and not lose the reference to the appropriate column or the appropriate row. The $ is the clue as to whether we're freezing the row or freezing the column. Again, lots and lots of free online resources on how to use absolute, relative, or partially relative cell addresses in a formula in Excel. This is an Excel thing. It's not a Blue Link thing. It's a standard Excel thing. But because of this, I'm able to actually copy this formula and still have it pointing to the right places. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm simply going to take that row. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it maybe, a couple lines down. And I might just do that again, a few more lines down. Let's make that column wider, and let's call this income or revenue. Yeah, I'll just call it income. Well, let's call it sales, actually. Let's call this costs of goods sold. So I'm not really doing anything particularly exciting now. This is just boring housekeeping. And let's call this expenses. But now what we can do is we can start getting a little bit clever, because we can say, I know that all my sales accounts begin with a 4, so let's just put that in as 4. Immediately it changes the number to minus 43,222. Don't worry about that, I'll come back to that in a moment. I know that my cost of goods sold accounts all start with 5, so I'll just change that to a 5. And I know my expense accounts all start with 6, so I'll change that to 6. And just like that, I've created 3 rows, one for sales, one for cost of goods, one for expenses, that are linked to data, so that if I change the month from 1 to, let's say, 6, the numbers change immediately to reflect the appropriate month, 7, etc. We'll go back to 1. I don't like the fact that this is showing as a negative number, so all I need to do is simply use a basic Excel skill, edit the formula, and put a minus sign right at the beginning. So we typically tend to do this for revenue, and on balance sheets, we typically tend to do this for liabilities and owner equity accounts. So now what we have is we have sales, cost of goods sold. Because we know Excel, we can easily say that our gross profit, or gross margin, whichever you want to call it, you'll notice I spend more time fixing typos than actually doing the work, is simply an Excel formula. I'm saying that minus that. Simple as that. And then we can, of course, do the same thing down here. We can say net income. Wow. Even for me, these typos are really bad today. And it's the same thing. It's equals gross profit minus expenses. So now I have a single period summarized profit and loss statement, and that really took just a few minutes. I'd like to make that, spread that out over a few months or maybe an entire year. So the first thing I'll do is I'll grab that entire column, copy it, and paste it. Now, there is a reason that I'm going to do what I'm doing in the sequence that I do it, and it is a little bit of it's what Microsoft calls a feature in Excel and what I call a bug. But I'll change this to number 2, period number 2. So now we've got January and February. And then what I can do is I can highlight both columns, grab the little copy handle here, and copy it across, and it'll keep incrementing the month appropriately, and we will get 12 months of our P&L. And again, same thing, if we look at that 64,000 and we drill into selection, we will get the same drill down information as we saw in the previous statement, because it's basically pulling the same data. So as quickly as that, I've created a simple statement that gives me 12 months worth of data. I can also add, if I want very quickly, another column, copy, paste, change that from month to year to date, and now I've got my year to date numbers. So in relatively short order, we have created a new report. We have done pretty much most of the heavy lifting to get to a statement like this one over here, other than the formatting. But there is one thing that we haven't done here. I don't have an easy way of changing the year, of quickly flipping to different years, because right now the year is hard-coded in each one of these. Now, what I typically do, and this is just an Excel hint, but it's a very, very strongly recommended one, is find a place somewhere on your statement where you're going to want to put the year and allow people to, or yourself to flip around and change the starting year. I'll typically maybe insert a column, and maybe what I'll do is insert a couple of rows as well, just to create myself a little bit more real estate. Doesn't really matter. You don't have to go to the lengths that I'm going to, but I'll put in a label saying year, and maybe what I'll do is just make these both centered using my regular Excel tools, and I'll plug in a starting year here, and for now I'm going to put 2019. And now what I do is I say, let's make that equal that year. Let's go to the second month and make it equal the previous one, and then I can simply copy that all the way across. Copy, go all the way across and paste. So therefore, the year is actually, in each column is actually a formula, and ultimately it comes back to this. So when I change this to 2018, everything changed to 2018, and we're good. Beyond that, there are basic Excel skills, again, not Blue Link financial report writer skills, but basic Excel skills that I use to generate things like the actual month name labels and things like that, the grouping and so on. But honestly, most of the intelligence that went into this report, the report on the profit and loss tab, is already here, and most of our work is already done in terms of creating a nice profit and loss statement. Okay. So going back to what I said at the beginning, towards the beginning of the session, actually, I'm going to just address one of the questions that came up here. One of the questions was, would you be able to combine two companies' financials together? And the answer to this is yes. There's a but, there's a however. The however is, be aware that if they have different fiscal years, then be very careful of getting results that you don't expect. The easiest way to do that is, one of the things that the BLFS formula refers to is, I'll just expand this column quickly, is this cell over here, which determines the company. Now, the company name will match one of these, or you'll get error messages. So you'll see demo data V14, that's the pseudonym that I gave the company. You can call it whatever you like, by the way. You're not locked to whatever the name is in the Blue Link Elite System Master, for example. But whatever name you've given it here, whatever alias you've given it here, has to appear here. So if I were to simply change in any one of these columns, if I were to change this company name from demo data V14 to Blue Link Associates, or whatever that other company was, AS something or other, it would immediately pull those numbers instead. So given that it's Excel, and given that you can then take column G is company 1, column H is company 2, and then column I could be G plus H, now you've consolidated those companies. I would also just be very cautious when you are consolidating to be aware about, obviously eliminating intercompany entries and things like that. But that's a whole other accounting discussion. But yeah, so you can definitely combine two companies' financials together. There was another question at the same time from the same person. Would it work with 13 periods as opposed to months? And if you do have the Blue Link variation on 13 period GL, then yes, it will actually work with 13 periods. Okay. So I think, Sam, if I'm not mistaken, those are the questions we have today before I get onto using some of the last few minutes to show something that I think is really cool.
Yep, those were the questions so far.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I wanted to showcase two things. Firstly, I just wanted to showcase, you remember we discussed earlier on the difference between the year-to-date, the Y, and the B, and I just wanted to demonstrate that. So on this tab, I've created a single line which has all my asset accounts. So my asset accounts balance as of, I guess, the end of 2019, fiscal month 12, so the end of 2019, the total balance of all my assets is 940,865. However, if I change the B to a Y, you'll notice that it changes to 143,435, and that is the net transaction value. So obviously my opening balance was in the $700 and something thousand for all my asset accounts before we even started the year. Okay? So I just wanted to point that out and show you that that does work. So if we go back to B, it'll do that. However, again, I'll just go back to my profit and loss. And again, I'll just point out that if I do that with my income and expense accounts, it makes no difference because there are no opening balances. So the last thing, if I go back to my the thing that I said right at the beginning, I said, this is an Excel add-in. It reports on general ledger data only. And then I said, however. And here's the however. As many of you hopefully know, you can live link an Excel spreadsheet to any data source that you can get access to, including a SQL Server database. Blue Link's data is stored in a SQL Server database, and many of our customers therefore use Excel to link to sales history, purchase history. Sales is usually the most widely used one, and generate things called pivot tables in Excel. If you're familiar with pivot tables, you probably know already where we're going. So let's go there quickly now. I've created a pivot table here that is linked to the same database, the exact same demo data as we were looking at. And all it's doing is it's doing a sales by, I guess this is by category. Let's just see. Yeah, sales by category by month for a given year. So on this, in the same workbook, albeit on different tabs, I have a profit and loss for 2019, and I have my sales by category. Now, you absolutely could, underneath this pivot table, insert a financial statement, or underneath this financial statement, insert a pivot table. You could also do them side by side. The danger there, though, is when a pivot table refreshes or you change the selections, it could basically rearrange your screen a little bit for you. So if you are going to insert a pivot table next to a financial statement, I would do it to the right, not to the left. And I would do it below the financial statement, not above the financial statement, to avoid unpleasant surprises when you suddenly change something in a pivot table. For those of you, in case anyone's not familiar with a pivot table, a great way of analyzing in real time. This is all linked to the Blue Link data. I did not key anything in. I only use the mouse to do this. And I can change things around if I don't want to do analysis by category, but I want to do analysis by, whoops, why is that not grabbing? Okay, there we go. I got rid of category, and now I'm going to bring in customer. Now I'm doing an analysis of sales by customer per month, etc. So very cool tool. I can change the columns. I can get rid of months or whatever the case is. But here's the thing: if I go to the profit and loss now, and I change this year to 2017, financials are now for 2017, but my pivot table is still 2019. Not as cool. So here's tip number. Here's sort of my final tip for you. If you are going to do this kind of thing, if you're going to have non-financial data in a workbook that you want to sync with your financial statement data, then what you do is you go back to this cell. Probably, if you want to be very careful, after you do what I'm about to do now, you then maybe want to lock the cell and protect it so you don't accidentally change it. But instead of it being a number, you point it to your pivot table selection. And now, anytime, and then you use your pivot table as your deciding factor. So if I want to change to 2017, I change my pivot table to 2017. Here's my sales by customer for 2017, and here's my profit and loss for 2017. Pretty cool. So just in case anybody out there is paying real attention, my sales for the year for 2017 per my general ledger are $189,000, but my sales by category for customers is $190,000. And the reason is, just to test the theory, there is a single journal entry in that year that actually debits one of the sales accounts and credits a work in progress account, okay? And this is one of the most common reason why your sales reports will not agree with your sales accounts in the GL, is that you have entries in the GL that do not go through sales history because they are general ledger, general journal adjustments. They are, to sales. They are accounts receivable, vouchers, things that don't go through a sales order screen or an RMA screen will not show up, obviously, in this detailed sales analysis, even if they go to those GL accounts. So that's pretty much, and I see I've gone a little bit over advertised time, but that's pretty much all that I was going to show. And now we will turn it over to questions and answers. Sam, do we have any other questions that I haven't addressed yet?
Yep, there's just one more question that has come in, but if people have other ones, now is the time. So the next question is, what is the quickest way to verify that the P&L numbers are accurate in the spreadsheet to Blue Link numbers?
That's a good question. I mean, me personally, I kind of know they are as long as I'm choosing the appropriate accounts, but you have a good point. I would say that one of the best things to do, if you're creating a true P&L and you're grouping all your accounts together, the one thing that you know for sure is that if we go back to well, actually, let me just do it this way. Actually, let me go back to this statement over here. So if we go back to our initial, in fact, I'll copy this into our initial, the line that initially gets created has all of your numbers. So it has, like, all the numbers should be 0, which proves that your trial balance balances. You also, this is taken in those numbers are taken in real time from your general ledger. So if you wanted to verify that this net income is correct and that you haven't excluded any expense accounts or sales accounts or things like that, probably one of the easiest ways to do that, and again, this depends on how good your GL account number structure is, would be to do things like saying, well, what I want to do is I want to aggregate this as being just from account number, let's say 40000 to account number 9999999. I'm guessing. I don't know if these make sense, but yeah, it looks like they do. Or create a formula somewhere in your statement at the bottom that incorporates all the entire range of profit and loss accounts. You don't have to separate them. You can have income and cost accounts and expense accounts all in the same range. But as long as that range does not include any asset, liability, or owner equity accounts, then that will in one line be sure to give you your net income, which you can then audit against these. And what you could do to make your statement not look ugly, potentially, is you could kind of move this further down. You could take this line and move it way, way down to where you don't see it. And then what you could even do, if you want to use very nifty Excel skills, is you could say, create a line just underneath your net income, which is going to be your statement's net income less the one that you know is correct, and then use conditional formatting to not show this if the value is 0. So you'll only see numbers showing up here if it's 0. Again, conditional formatting being an Excel skill, so I'm not going to go into it, but conditional formatting, pretty self-explanatory off of the home tab of the ribbon in Excel. So that would be one way. The only other way I can think of, and honestly, this is what I've done as well, is in Blue Link Elite itself, one of my favorite screens is the GL inquiry screen. And I just go to the GL inquiry screen, filter for only income and expense accounts, click display, and then the bottom line, the total at the bottom of that screen is my net income for the current year, previous year, and 2 years ago. And that's an easy way to now audit the year-to-date number. So hopefully that answers the question.
Awesome. So that was the last question. There was a question right at the beginning about whether we would be sending out a recording, and the plan is yes. We were having some technical difficulties earlier, so assuming those have been resolved, I will be able to send out a recording of this to all of you, as well as you guys can forward it to anybody on your team.
Okay, great. Well, I don't want to keep anybody longer than is necessary, although I think we did budget about 45 minutes, right, Sam, to allow for Q&A. So I think we're good for time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. Again, I will emphasize that the user guide, which will always be updated before you release a new release with any new features, is comprehensive. It does tell you everything that you need to know. The training videos that exist, plus this video of this session, will be available, and we will be adding a little bit more in terms of training videos when we do the next release that we're going to work on this summer, because we are going to be adding 2 or 3 additional features and at least 1 additional button on this Blue Link ribbon at the top.
And I just added my email into the group chat in case anybody does have questions about this or wants to learn more about setting it up for your company. If it's not something you have, definitely just email me and I'll try to answer any of your questions. Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks all, and I hope everybody's staying safe, and let's get through this together.